Me.
Oh, okay.
Welcome, everyone. You just got to hear a little bit of Bob and my side conversation because we are indeed, I won't say old friends, but we're friends.
We've been friends a long time. Yeah.
We've been friends a long time, and it's such an honor to be able to talk with Bob a little bit today about his life and his journey as part of the monthly Rainbow Inspirations show in collaboration with Blue Ridge Pride, Generations Plus, and AARP. We like to tell the stories of people in our communities who are of influence and making a difference. So today I get to welcome my friend, Bob Tomasulo. So, Bob, I want to know a little bit about your background, like where you come from. So, tell me a little bit about where you were born. Yeah, the
Okay.
beginnings.
Sure. I was born in Buffalo, New York, so I'm a Yankee uh, from Western New York State, not too far from where you were born and grew up. Uh, so we're both familiar with that area of the country. I lived there basically for almost until through college, and
Hmm.
then I moved to New York City, and that's kind of when I consider my adult life starting. It's when I
Hmm.
moved to New York City. Uh,
Hmm.
it was a job with the government, the U.S. federal government, Social Security Administration. Uh, I took the job thinking that it was going to be a temporary position, and then
Huh.
once I found something that I liked better, I would move into that. I never did, uh,
Wow.
so I ended up staying 33 years.
Wow.
Uh, so it was a career that kind of accidentally happened. Really, I didn't plan it to be that way, but it turned out to be that way.
That reminds me of a conversation we had recently about planning for the future. And you said I think you said something like, the best things that happen to me usually don't happen with a plan. They're the things that just kind of open up for you. And so it sounds like that was a good example of that.
Exactly, exactly, and it took me in a lot of different directions. I'm an introvert by nature, uh, but I ended up really with a job that required an extrovert. So it was uh, a real adjustment for me. I had to learn how to be an extrovert, at least part time, and then privately, as you know, I tend to be more quiet and reserved. Uh, but I can be very vocal publicly and engage with whatever audience I'm dealing with.
Yeah, I've seen that in action. I've seen both sides of you, the introvert and the more, the extrovert when you can put that on. Does it require you to have passion about the topic or internal excitement about the topic in order to be more extroverted?
I think it does. It does. It kind of is the spark that lights the fire up that I need under me to to get going. Uh, so yes, I would say that it definitely requires a passion. Uh, we've talked about I've worked with aging all my career, uh, and that didn't start out, I don't think, as a passion, although I was
Mhm,
always interested and related to older adults, even when as a kid. Uh,
mhm,
I spent a lot of time with my grandmother, as you did, uh,
mhm.
and I think she was an inspiration in that respect. Uh, but I didn't see aging as a topic or a career. I mean, I just knew that I got along very well with older adults and enjoyed talking with them and learning about what their lives were like. So
Mhm.
that was an important part of growing up. And then this is kind of a segue into that with the Social Security Administration. I knew very little about Social Security. I was only 24 years old.
Mm.
So most 24-year-olds don't think too much about Social Security. They still don't, unfortunately, but
Mhm.
we know they should. So I kind of slid into it, thinking, well, this is okay,
Mhm.
but I didn't see it as a passion. I
Mhm.
didn't see it as a passion. And at the same time, I was dealing with my sexuality and coming out as a gay man at a time when that wasn't too popular uh,
Mhm.
in the mid '70s.
Mhm.
So those two things kind of went together. I started work at the Social Security Administration, and I remember my first day. I still remember the first day on the job. I
Oh,
met
wow.
I got assigned to an office in Brooklyn,
Hmm.
uh, and had gotten an apartment in Brooklyn. I was living there, so I knew. And I met the manager. The manager was an older gentleman who had been with the agency since 1937. He was one of the original employees for the Social
Wow.
Security Administration, and he was getting close to retirement. But he was well regarded and respected by the others in the agency. I'd heard from others in finding out, and I did something that I not sure was the smartest thing to do at the time, but I did it anyway. You
Hmm.
know, when you're 24 years old, you tend to do things that you might not do later in life. Uh, and I uh, told him that I was a gay man and that I hoped
Wow.
he didn't have a problem with that, which was kind of pretty gutsy, I think, for
It's
me.
bold.
For me at the time, I was a little bit fearless about it, but I had decided that I didn't want to be closeted in the workplace. I wanted to be myself because that was where I saw my life going, and I had hidden for too long, as most uh, gay people do, particularly when they're teenagers and young adults. So it was a coming out process for me as well as a new job. And he said he didn't have a problem with that as long as I did my work. And we had a good relationship. For I think I worked with him for about 6 years, uh, and I think that helped me, gave me confidence uh, that I didn't have to worry about that part of my life. It was okay, you know.
Wow.
But
At
so
24, you
mhm.
got that confidence by
And
taking that bold move, but I bet it changed the rest of your career, in order to when you like you said, it you gave you confidence for the future so that you could always be yourself in the workplace.
it did, yes, it did, and it was also the first time I would. I mean, I went to New York City, which is probably one of the most cosmopolitan places in the country that you could go to, and so I was exposed to a lot of different cultures and peoples that I had never experienced growing up in Buffalo, which was fairly homogeneous. Um, so that was a great opportunity for me too. I met Asian people, African American people, Hispanic people. These are all communities that I had never experienced before, and so that was a learning process for me. And I found it fascinating. First of all, and I loved it. And
Mm.
after I think it was about 6 years, I was promoted to management, which was and assigned to an office in Manhattan in Chinatown,
Oh, wow.
where
Cool.
I was one of three people who in the office who was not Chinese.
Huh.
Uh, because one of the requirements for the office was you had to be bilingual in English and
Oh,
Chinese,
wow.
and but it didn't apply to management. And since I was going to be a manager in that office, I didn't have to be bilingual at that time. They actually didn't have enough people that were bilingual, so I kind of was the next best thing they had. I'm not sure that played out, but it was fascinating, and I learned so much about the Chinese people and culture, and it was a wonderful experience. But I also learned that I didn't want to be in management. I didn't want to be a supervisor, which is what I was, because it was more HR type stuff,
Mhm.
and that really wasn't what I wanted to do. I wasn't engaging with the public anymore, which is what I loved about the job to begin with, because I would get to meet so many different people.
Mhm.
And so I knew that that wasn't where I wanted to be eventually. It was okay as a temporary stop on the road, but it wasn't making me happy. And I actually considered leaving and finding some other type of work because
Wow.
that wasn't the type of work that I wanted to do. And then something else came from left field, as you would say. Uh, it was the early 80s. And the Chinatown, well, if you know Manhattan at all, Chinatown was in lower Manhattan, not too far from Greenwich Village, which was where uh, the gay community was headquartered, if you will, at that time.
Huh.
There were a lot of gays in Greenwich Village. It was known as a gay mecca in the U.S. Uh, and we started seeing a lot of younger men coming into the office to file for disability benefits
Hmm.
because something that they then called GRID, G-R-I-D, gay-related immune deficiency, I think it was called,
Wow.
before they even named it as AIDS.
Wow.
Uh, and because I was openly gay, and I was at the time I was the only employee who was not. I was not the only gay employee, but I was the only one who was openly so. And the head of the offices in the New York region called me and said, "We need your help." And he said, "We're having all of these AIDS, and it wasn't AIDS, it was called GRID then, but AIDS people were coming in, and the employees don't know what to do. They're afraid, they don't understand it.
Oh, wow.
A lot of misinformation back then. And the only qualification I had was I happened to be gay. I had no medical background at all. I took a health course, I think, in high school, but that was about it. You know, and that wasn't even a topic then. So
Wow.
we need somebody to educate the employees about this so that they're lessen their fears and anxieties about contact with these individuals. So I said, okay, kind of not knowing what I was going to do. And I did a crash course in learning everything I could about HIV and AIDS, uh, which was very little known then. They didn't know exactly what caused it. There were lots of fears that you could get it from touching somebody, from breathing the same air, from being in the same room with people. It was, ridiculous. Uh, and it was causing also, from the agency standpoint, it was a public relations problem
Mm.
because they were getting a lot of negative publicity about how people were being treated or
Huh.
mistreated in the offices. And I think there were at the time there were about 13 offices in Manhattan alone, and those are the only ones I worked with. Uh, but I went around, I prepared we didn't even have PowerPoint back then, but I prepared an hour-long training, kind of giving people the basics and telling them what the facts were. Uh, Fake news was not the term we used, but there was a lot of misinformation uh, back then. So it helped, I think, to reduce the anxiety of some of the employees about dealing with these individuals. And so that kind of took me on a whole different path. I was kind of working as a gay man on a topic that was becoming increasingly um, it was a big issue in the day because the government didn't know what to do. Nobody knew what to do. There was a lot of homophobia. Uh, so there was a lot of things going on that were making it a very difficult situation. A lot of parallels to what we're doing with COVID right now too. Um, when you think about it, it's just something we don't know a lot about, and it just keeps uh, impacting people's lives.
And it seems like there's a need for the calm because there is so much fear. And it's just when people don't know, and especially in today's circumstances, it keeps changing. The facts keep changing about, COVID, and people are scared. And I can imagine it was a similar experience then. People were scared, and you provided us, like you do now, you provided
Mhm.
a sense of calm by just providing the facts and helping people to ask questions, feel safe and comfortable. What
Mhm.
a twist and turn in
Yeah,
that journey that you happen to be in
and
the
it's
right place.
the right place at the right time. And that basically was it. And it allowed me to also get out of the aspects of the job I didn't like so that I was uh, enjoying my work again, which made a big difference. Uh, then I'd also met my husband, Michael, at that time, and he also worked for the government. He worked for the IRS, uh, and we decided to move to Florida. Uh,
Before you go to that, I
yeah.
think people need to hear the story of how you met. 'Cause it's too good.
Yeah. The I was never being an introvert, going to clubs and bars as a young man was not something I really enjoyed that much, and it was hard for me to meet people. So I thought, well, I wanted to meet people. That
Yeah.
was, I wanted to meet somebody, and at the time, a popular way to do that for the gay community, especially, was we didn't have the internet yet, uh, and Grinder and Tinder and all those other things they've got now. Uh, so they did have personal ads in the newspapers, in the local newspaper, underground newspaper, as they called them then. They weren't mainstream. They weren't the New York Times, uh, but it was called the Village Voice. Was a newspaper that was published in Manhattan and had a wide readership among young people. And so I put an ad in the paper. Got a lot of responses actually, and Michael's response was one I answered. We met. Um, and again, connected, and 35 years later, we're still together. Uh, has been a great ride, if you say. But that again was just kind of a chance thing that worked out. It worked out.
Your story helps me in so many ways like you do, but just remembering that wherever you are is the place that you need to be for the usually,
Mhm,
especially if you're enjoying it, and just to be patient and wait, sometimes is the thing to do to see what opens up next. And I just love like it's kind of romantic. The idea of placing up, a
mhm,
classified ad. I could just imagine that little box
mhm.
that caught Michael's attention. That's so cool.
I have to show.
Um,
I have to show it to you sometime.
you still have it?
I
You
still
still
have it.
have
I had it
Oh.
laminated. So
And when did so I didn't ask, but, like, when did you come out to your family, and to your, like, your community that was around you?
I had done that. Uh, well, moving to New York also took me away from family, so they gave me some distance, and it allowed me, I think, to build my life the way I saw it, uh, without having family breathing down on me all the time. So I came out kind of gradually to them. Uh, they would come to visit me in New York. My
Okay.
parents and siblings would come to visit. Um, and they kind of gradually picked up on things. Like most of my friends were gay men, other gay men. Uh, Not that we called ourselves that even then, but
Mm.
and I had a roommate, and
If you
really,
didn't call yourselves gay men, what did you call yourselves?
uh, well, among ourselves we were gay
Oh,
men, but as
right.
far as the rest of the world is, we were just single men. No,
Mhm.
uh,
Mhm.
and it was a time too when the whole issue of gay rights and things was coming to the forefront, and together with the HIV issue. So it kind of got swept along in that. So more and more people were coming out and expressing their sexuality in a public way. So it kind of was easier, I think, in that sense, because it wasn't just me.
Mhm.
Uh,
Mhm.
so it was probably again, I was in the right place at the right time. I also lived in New York City, which is fairly cosmopolitan, and it was much easier to come out there than it would be, say, in even Asheville or Henderson,
Buffalo,
where I live
for sure.
now.
Um,
Uh,
so you came out to your job before you came out to your family?
yes,
Okay.
yes,
And that gave you confidence in the rest of your
yeah.
life to start coming
Mhm,
out. Wow. Now that really points to how pivotal that moment was when you chose
mhm,
to come out at your job.
yeah.
Let
And
me
again,
just
I had a family that was accepting,
Mhm.
kind of reluctantly accepting. Uh, they weren't totally
Okay.
thrilled. They weren't thrilled about it, uh, but
Okay.
it worked, and they accepted me. And over time, we ended up with a good relationship. My parents both lived to be 93, so I had them as part of my life until I was almost 70 years old.
Wow.
That was a good thing. It was a good thing, and they loved Michael. He was part of the family, still is, uh, and it's never been a problem um, since then. Really hasn't.
Well, it sounds like that first initial period was a little, a little dissonant maybe, like it took them a
Yeah.
minute and when you're young and you're coming out to your family, I think it's important. That's like an important lesson that sometimes it isn't an instant acceptance, but it reluctantly accepting, I think is the words you used. And
Mhm. Yeah,
that's good to have perspective on coming from,
it is.
looking back.
And we've come a long way in the last 30 years. So that,
True.
you know, although I think it's still a challenge for a lot of young people uh, to come out, depending on what their background and where they grew up, it all plays into the factors of how you do it and how successful you are when you do it. And
Right.
and I then at the same time I got involved with the aging issue.
Mhm.
Was asked about my other passion, which
Mhm.
turned out to be aging. Uh, there was a group called SAGE, SAGE,
Mhm.
that still exists in New York. It started in New York, and I volunteered with them. Uh, and they would run mostly social events in the beginning uh, for older gay adults who, again, weren't interested in the bar scene anymore and going to out dancing at all hours of the night. So they wanted a more acceptable and comfortable place to socialize and meet other people like themselves. And so Sage was started by a group of people in New York. And shortly about it, I think it was 1984 or so is when I began volunteering with them. It was
Hmm.
before I even met Michael.
Hmm.
Uh, and so I got to know a lot of older gay people.
Hmm.
And that was interesting too, because their stories were much different than mine,
Mhm.
because they grew up and came out in the 40s and 50s.
Wow.
It was a totally different world back then. So that I learned a lot from those people and found them very interesting. And
How
later,
long did you volunteer with Sage?
uh, well, actually, almost 20 years probably, because
Wow.
when we moved to Florida, not long after, a group started up in Florida too, a branch of SAGE started in Florida. And so we were active in that. I was on their board for a number of years. Um, and we did a lot more. We did a lot of educational activities and presentations, and they'd have monthly luncheons and dinner dinner dances a couple times a year. They were a very active group. They still are. Uh, it's grown, and there are now, I don't know, 25, 26 groups across the country, uh, all branches of SAGE, but they all operate independently. As you know, we have in North Carolina, we have one in Raleigh, we have one in Wilmington.
Mhm.
Uh, the So it's thrived. It's a thriving gay organization, uh,
Mhm.
and much needed, much needed. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't really know that you had volunteered with Sage for that long. I mean, I remember when we were working with the LGBT elder advocates and we applied to become a Sage affiliate, and that wasn't quite the right fit, but I didn't recognize how much experience you had had with Sage. And I know from an AARP perspective, we see them as a great resource for information and sensitivity trainings. What are some other, like maybe fast forwarding to Florida, some other pivotal moments in your career where maybe aging and LGBT related issues intersect, or maybe not? What else comes to mind?
Well, I did when I got to Florida. The As I said, I was trying to get out of the management aspects of my job,
Mhm.
and again, in Florida, they had a large gay population. South Florida was in Fort Lauderdale, so did and still has a large gay population. So HIV and AIDS was a big issue there, and it was a controversial issue still. Uh, Not too long ago, before I moved to Florida, there was a woman by the name of Anita Bryant uh,
Hmm.
who mobilized the electorate in Florida to ban basically any type of gay rights in the state of Florida.
Wow.
Uh, so they were trying to pass anti-discrimination bills at that time. Uh, and so it had been a big issue in Florida. It was a big controversy not too long before we moved there. Uh, but again, my superiors in the agency were concerned because it was something we had to deal with. The
Mhm.
disability benefits mostly uh, were critical to people who were coming down with what was then a fatal disease. Uh, you didn't recover from HIV, AIDS, full blown AIDS, as they called it. Uh, so it was important that their applications for disability benefits be processed quickly because you didn't want to wait 6 to 12 months to get an application approved. So we had an expedited process uh, initiated, and then I was asked to uh, put that in place and train the doctors and other healthcare professionals in how to fill out the forms correctly so that it didn't delay the process. We could
Wow.
the process. So I would speak to different groups of medical professionals in hospitals and even private practice, uh, explaining to them what they needed to do, how they needed to fill out the forms correctly, so that once they were in place, they could get processed quickly. And that worked very well. And it also it spread to other parts of Florida. So I was uh, basically working in from everything from Orlando south to Key West was my territory, if you will. And so I did educational forums and programs. Went to health fairs. We'd have a booth
Wow.
at any type of HIV conference and convention. So uh, that became my job, really. As I was called the HIV coordinator.
Wow.
It was a temporary position because back again, politics interferes as it always does. Uh, there wasn't any money. The Congress would not appropriate any extra money for HIV and AIDS. Uh, but uh, when Clinton was elected in '92, uh, he figured out a way to get some money from the Department of Health and Education to run pilot programs. And they ran 3 pilot programs for HIV in the country. One was in Fort Lauderdale, and it did mainly with the gay population because it was so large. The other was in Miami, which dealt with the Hispanic and Haitian populations,
Hmm.
which were also impacted uh, greatly by HIV and AIDS. And then there was a third one in LA, which worked with Mexican Americans mostly.
Hmm.
And our job was basically to make sure that those cases were processed as quickly as possible and the benefits were paid out as appropriate to the people involved. And
Wow.
so that that uh, that was a fascinating experience. I got to go to national conferences and things like that. Met people I would have never encountered before. Uh, because, as I said, I was not a healthcare professional. I was a history major. It's
I
like,
wondered, I didn't ask that, but now the whole history perspective means something different now looking back on your life. Historically, all of those things are really relevant, even though you didn't have the health or medical experience. I mean, that is kind of interesting that you were a history major. Um, I mean, that made such a difference in so many people's lives, Bob. That's what occurs to me. Not only was it really interesting to you, but like you made sure people got their benefits before they died and that they could, have some quality of life towards the end of their years. And you helped to sensitize healthcare providers and social service providers to understand more about, how they need to do things and understand and have empathy for people. That's pretty awesome. Is there, we're actually almost out of time, Bob. Did you know that? It's 12:29.
goodness, it went fast.
I heard
It
stories I've
always
never
does when
heard
we talk.
before.
When you
I
and I talk,
know.
time always flies.
Well, it was great for me. I don't hear that. I haven't heard all of the nuances of these stories and some of the depth. Is there anything else that you think was like a really pivotal part of your career that kind of has shaped who you are and what you continue to do?
Well, I think my experiences taught me how to treat people
Mhm.
and the importance of uh, the proper care, particularly as people age, that they need. And that's kind of where I'm looking at more now. People in long-term care facilities and that type of thing that I work closely with Land of Sky on. So it's become, even as I'm aging, it's still important to me. and it's something I'm very passionate about and will continue to work on as long as I can. Uh, Provide some help or assistance to people.
Well, I'm so glad that you have this passion and that it fits perfectly with ours, with mine, with AARP. I remember when Leanne Tucker got a note from you saying, I'm interested in volunteering at the Area Agency on Aging over a decade ago, and somehow through that process we synced up, and I've taken so many lessons from our time together, Bob. I've learned so much, and one of the big one is if you don't put it out there, no one's going to know that you're available and you're interested in expanding your horizons. And
Mhm.
yeah, you continue to inspire me. I'm so happy that we had a chance to talk today. If this program inspired you, I'm gonna put the banner up, share it. Just press the share button. It would be nice for others in the community to have the opportunity to hear more about Bob Tomasulo and a life still being well lived. And in collaboration with Generation Plus, we all are really into the storytelling thing because it is our history. It's history in the making. People have some great stories. And if you're interested in that, Blue Ridge Pride has a really cool initiative. And you can go to blueridgepride.org and check out their oral history project. So that is all for today. We will look forward to seeing everyone next month. And so that'll be February, I think it's the 8th, the 9th. No,
Mhm.
wait, it's the 1st. That's right, because it's the first day of February next month.
Okay.
So we'll see y'all back here. Thanks, Bob, and thanks, everybody. We'll see you
Thank you. Have
Bye
a
for
good
now.
day.